Welcome. Good morning and thank you for joining us for today's session titled Getting to Carbon Neutrality at the St. George Campus. One of the live sessions is part of the Adams Sustainability Celebration. This virtual event series was organized by our colleagues over at the Committee on Environment, Climate Change and Sustainability, or CECCS for short, and is celebrating successes, inspiring new activities, building relationships, and collaboratively deepening campus engagement around sustainability in honor of the growing community of sustainability-minded students, faculty, and staff at the University of Toronto. This event series was made possible by the generous donation from Wendy Adams. As we begin today, we would like to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We would also like to express gratitude for the guidance, actions of Indigenous elders and all the peacekeepers who live and work on this land historically and presently to deepen our relationship with the land and to one another through inclusive, sustainable stewardship teachings and practices. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to today's live session. My name is Jennifer Pushkar and I'm a project coordinator with the Sustainability Office at our downtown Toronto St. George campus. The Sustainability Office is the engagement unit within operations, and we are thrilled that you are joining us this morning. The previous panel session for this series explored efforts at U of T to advance the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which were adopted in 2015 as a global framework to achieve prosperity for people and the planet by 2030. Our conversation today is focused on the urgency to accelerate the SDG goals that address our climate crisis. Joined with me are three of my colleagues that work daily to embed sustainability into the fabric of University of Toronto operations. They include Ron Saporta, Chief Operating Officer of Property Services and Sustainability, Mark Couture, our Director of Sustainability Operations and Services, and my colleague Adriana DeSena, Project Coordinator and Strategic Partnerships and Campus Community Engagement Lead. We'll be sharing about an aspect of St. George campus's efforts to reduce its carbon footprint and advance U of T's commitment for action on climate change from our operations lens. Some highlights include the creation of a 5-year low carbon action plan to help position U of T to meet its tri-campus 2030 reduction target and the launch of a net zero campus master plan. The discussion will conclude with a glimpse of campus community engagement work and the exciting initiatives on the horizon. My colleagues will walk you through the context and highlights of these plans, with about 15 to 20 minutes reserved for questions and answers at the end of the session. I'd also encourage you to please write your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or if you're attending via FeedLoop, our virtual event platform, you can use the chat box there. We will be monitoring these spaces and creating a list of questions for the panelists to be discussed in the Q&A period at the end of this session. A reminder that this session is being recorded and will be made available along with all of the other live sessions after the event. I will now extend a warm welcome to Ron Saporta, Chief Operating Officer of Property Services and Sustainability, to start us off. Over to you, Ron.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to get together with everyone today to talk about this important topic. I think it's important, though, before I jump into the net zero aspirations that we have, that we just set a bit of context so everyone understands the type of challenges that we face when we develop a net zero plan. The St. George campus, pre-COVID, of course, on a regular sort of year, would have a population of about 100,000. And, you know, interesting enough, if you put that up against the census in Canada, we would be in a top 50 size city. And we very much approach a lot of the problems that we have from a city within a city type approach. And I say that because a lot of the services you see that the municipality would have are ones that we mirror and have within the university. Another thing I'd like to mention, although not necessarily proud of it, we get the bronze medal in the province. Not the kind of bronze medal you want. In fact, what I'm trying to say here is that we are the third largest emitter of carbon in the public sector across our province, only behind the city of Toronto itself and all of the schools within the Toronto School Board combined. Not necessarily the type of medal that we want, but it's important to note and that we understand where that's coming from and the type of challenges that we have in front of us. And in fact, when you look at even some of our short-term reduction goals, our short-term reduction goal, meaning out to 2030, is actually greater than the annual emissions of any other institution of the province. And a lot of that is just because of our size and our scale and our research intensity. And in fact, if you compare it to some private sector places, we actually have more carbon emissions from our campuses than places like automotive manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing in the province. These are not things that we're proud of, but these are things that are important to understand from a context perspective, so that when we start to develop our net zero plans, we know where we're at and where we need to go. Now, a lot of what we do in operations and related to this plan is built on success that we already have. In fact, we are considered amongst Canada's greenest employers. We've got a significant revolving fund that we use to enable these type of projects. A couple of interesting things not listed here. For example, we had an embedded energy manager introduced to the institution in the 1970s, one of the first actually in the country before people were even talking about sustainability. We were looking at what we can do to reduce our energy consumption. Many people are likely aware of our 2030 goals. Our 2030 commitment is to be 37% below our 1990s level by that year. And this was the initial commitment that we made a couple of years back, in line with our UC3 partners, in line with Paris Accords at the time, and something that we feel quite strongly, and that we developed a low carbon action plan to achieve this. But at the same time, we have started to focus on what does it look like past 2050. You often would hear our president talk about how we are on a pathway to net zero. And I think that what we're going to show you today is a bit more detail about what that pathway looks like and how we actually get there. But first, it's important to talk about what is carbon neutrality. When you look at carbon neutrality and you try to measure it and understand it, you'll discover that there is no standard definition. There's probably 50 or 60 definitions out there made up by a lot of really reputable groups. So we had to settle on what we think carbon neutral is. And from our perspective, and you can see our emission projections shown here, we started to look at peers and what peers have in mind. And even from there, we discovered that not even peers in the higher education sector are aligned as to what carbon neutral means. Almost everybody clearly says they have to do a scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. Not everybody's considering scope 3 emissions. There's conversations around whether carbon offsets should be part of it. Can we simply purchase these carbon offsets externally and have that count towards our own neutrality? Things of that nature. So it was incumbent upon us to start this journey by creating a definition. What does carbon neutral mean at the University of Toronto? And this is a tri-campus definition that has been adopted and one that we are working towards. And what it means, our first primary objective is an absolute reduction of emissions to be 80% below the 1990s level. So we cut our emissions first by 80%. And in the last 20%, we will look to renewable energy to close that gap. What it doesn't mean, you can see that big red in the bottom, and this is my sort of personal pet peeve, it does not mean that we would use third-party offsets. Fundamentally, I don't subscribe to the notion of being able to send U of T resources off campus to be able to say that we're reducing carbon. We should take that action locally, and we should take that action with assets that are ours. And so that is our strategy, an 8% reduction, and then we would offset that last 20%. From a framework perspective, our overarching framework actually hasn't deviated much from what we saw within the Low Carbon Action Plan. What has changed is the timeframes that we're looking at. And what that framework looks like is we have a realization that we produce energy, we distribute that energy within our campus, and lastly, although I would argue most importantly, we're consuming that energy. And our framework looks at these three aspects. It looks to make sure that we are producing energy as clean as possible, and where we're not, we're looking at capture options, that we are distributing that energy extremely efficiently so we don't have unnecessary losses, and lastly, we reduce our consumption. And we continued on the path using the 4 principles that we developed. First of which is a focus on reduction, an emphasis once again that the cheapest, the cleanest, the least carbon type energy is the one that you simply don't consume. So if you can reduce your consumption, you're well on your way to a net zero type approach. There is a realization that we need to address, which is this balance between carbon and cost. We updated this data here in August, and as of August this year, electricity is 4.5 times cleaner than gas. So if you invert that, what that simply says is that if we electrify the entire campus, we'd would hit our 80% reduction target for absolute emissions. But the challenge is that it is 11 times more expensive on a per energy basis. Put that into context, we spend over $40 million a year on electricity on the St. George campus because of our size, because of our 200 buildings. That would mean an addition of $200 million. That's not realistic or feasible. So we need to figure out how we balance these two in a way that addresses both needs. And I can tell you that we have. It's not meant to be an excuse and that we can't do this because of cost. Well, it means we need to do this being mindful of the cost and do it in a very responsible way. The other interesting and unique aspect of the St. George campus is that about 12% of the carbon emissions that are attributed to us are actually related to energy that go to third-party assets. Places like the ROM, the Gardner Museum, a couple of office buildings adjacent to our campus are actually fed from our district energy system. So for us to meet our net zero aspirations, we need to reach beyond the traditional UFT borders and get those groups to also reduce. And this very much, parallels and mirrors the discussion of a city within the city, because these are the same types of policy challenges that our municipal partners are facing, and where we have opportunities to work with them to make this happen. And the fourth principle that I think is extremely important, and one that really sets us apart and quite frankly gives us a significant advantage, is that we have the opportunity to tap into amazing innovation right at our doorstep. That's through initiatives like Campus as a Living Lab, where we partner with our student populations, or we start to partner with our researchers and our faculty to develop innovative solutions to tackle this. And you'll hear about one or two of those examples later today. So what does this mean? You can see our emissions in 2019, and you can see how that dot is going down, 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 where we need to be out in 2050. That's our target. You can see our interim target, or where we want to be by 2030. And then where we have to go beyond that. And just a reminder that we do this through quite diligently planning specific initiatives that start to tackle this. This is an excerpt from our low carbon action plan that speaks to the time frame of the next 3 or 4 years. And what we are in the process of doing is to develop these type of projections with very specific projects that highlight how we do this out to the year 2050. So what does our net zero strategy look like? Well, there's 3 pillars that are important to highlight. First of which is a renewal aspiration. Remember, we're approaching our 200-year anniversary as an institution. We have buildings on our campus that are 120, 130 years old, and we even have infrastructure below the ground from tunnels and pipes that are just as old. So any plan that we come up with needs to renew this utility, needs to renew that infrastructure to ensure that we're here for another 200 years. The other exciting element of our institution is that we have amazing growth aspirations in our academic pursuits and our research pursuits, and that translates into growth of a campus, and you'll see the numbers on that. So any of our net zero strategies need to also accommodate that growth, because at the end of the day, carbon targets are absolute targets. They're not relative targets to buildings. And lastly, all of this needs to happen within a net zero environment. One really interesting component I thought I'd throw out there, we spent a good amount of time with our steering committee and talking to several faculty around how does climate change over a 30-year time frame impact our utility consumption and impact our net zero strategy. And it's quite obvious that it does. What we needed to figure out is what was an appropriate way to model this and what were appropriate assumptions so that we ensure that we've got a plan that is resilient and a plan that accommodates that potential change that occurs within the climate. And for us, you can see here what we ended up coming up with is that we do project and believe that there's going to be a reduction in our heating needs over time, but there's going to be a significant increase in our cooling needs over time as we start to see climate change happening in our local context. And our plan incorporates a lot of this and understands and builds in the flexibility to know that these are projections, but we do believe that these things are going to occur. We need to ensure that we are ready to meet those changes in demands. I talked a little bit about growth, and I really wish we had a better image than this sort of multitude of colors of our campus. But to explain what it is, the different colors speak to different timeframes of development that we have. I think what's the probably key message here is that between now and 2050, over a 30-year period, we are anticipating a near doubling of our campus. This is through new research buildings, through new academic centers, and our plan needs to accommodate that. We need to ensure that we can allow for this growth in a sustainable fashion and still maintain our net zero aspirations. So what does it look like when you pull all of this together? We struck a steering committee and spent about 1.5 years looking at various different options. And we seriously discussed everything that's up on this screen here. Everything from deep geothermal, biomass solutions. We discussed what is the future of hydrogen and how is that built into our network. We even dabbled a little bit in conversations around micronuclear, which was probably not fitting in a downtown urban setting, especially not in Canada's largest city, but it is a technology that's out there. And we started to piece these together, and this is sort of a stacking diagram where you look at how you meet our different needs and stack these different technologies together in all these various different formats. And where we ended up with is a plan that we believe is flexible in the event that new technologies will come. It's very difficult to project technology over a 30-year time frame. But what's important is that the plan allows for flexibility so that if something changes, we're ready to adopt that if it's appropriate. But we did end up with a plan that is primarily focused on electrification. Now, how you do that also varies significantly. We focused on everything from what we call internodal plants, so having a district energy system that is nodal based and connected for resiliency and redundancy. We talked about nodal districts versus one massive campus. Do we look at it as nodal districts and have smaller district energy systems? Or do we even consider what does a completely decentralized approach look like? And we weigh these on a variety of different fronts. But what's important to note is that all of these options meet our carbon targets. So if we want an 80% reduction, we need to have that number there at about 19,000 metric tons. All of these alternatives meet that goal. So then we had a task of better understanding how do we weigh these options. And what we did is we looked at a matrix type evaluation where we looked at the environmental impacts. We talked about the resiliency of these different options. What are operational impacts related to operating a campus and the impacts the system would have. Some of the more social aspects, and then the economic aspects of it as well. And ultimately, we came up with leaning towards that internodal type solution. So this is what it looks like in one page. Pardon me, I laugh about that because this is a 700-page report that took 18 months to create, and I'm pretty sure that my team had a heart attack when I summarized it all in 5 bullets in one image. But that's what this looks like. And that we've got those internodal plants. We don't exactly know where they're going to be just yet. We have some sites selected for the majority of them. And these plants become interconnected. First and foremost, we eliminate steam, which is a big portion of the strategy. And we look at lower forms of carbon for that thermal distribution. Electrically, at present, many of you might not know this, we have one feed coming in from Toronto Hydro that does 80% of our campus. We're looking to diversify that with multiple feeds coming in that are cross-connected. And that's really part of our resiliency strategy. So that if there's an external issue, how do we maintain resiliency on our campus? And then lastly, and you'll hear more about this, Mark will talk to it around how we've rolled out a carbon and energy budget. So when you're dealing with something over a 30-year time frame, how do you make sure all your new buildings are aligned with this plan? Well, what we've done is we've, in essence, given everybody a carbon and an energy budget, and they have to build better than that. And by doing that, we can ensure that we remain on our plan in the long run. I think you can see the big call out at the bottom of the screen that we know that there's appetite for more detail in and around this plan. And our intention is to share that with the broader community early in 2021. So that people can see the plan and of course give us their sort of advice in and around it. So I'm going to pause there. That was me setting the context, which I think is extremely important in the framework in and around the plan. Like I said, it's a 30-year projection, so it's going to be quite tough to be able to get into the details of what we're doing in a 30-year plan. But we did want to highlight several of them. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, who will walk us through the projects that we're contemplating, or some of them, within this time frame.
Thank you, Ron. So shifting gears a little bit, going into our low carbon action plan, we capture those three same categories: the produce, distribute, and consume. And one of our key strategies here is to look to be producing clean renewable energy, especially around thermal energy, around heating and cooling. And one of the strategies we're looking at here is geo-exchange. So we've initiated a few different geo-exchange projects, and these will provide sustainable low carbon sources of heating as well as cooling. One of the advantages here in Toronto is that our seasonal average temperature is somewhere around 9 Celsius. And the ground actually acts as a thermal battery. It maintains a fairly constant temperature of 9 Celsius. And so by digging wells and leveraging that stable source of temperature, we're able to effectively use heat pumps, electric heat pumps, to produce high efficiency heating and cooling. And further to that, we're actually able to use that ground, that thermal mass as a battery. And we're able to shift that temperature a little bit lower and above that average 9C to get even greater efficiencies and to act as a thermal battery. So this will result in ongoing reduced maintenance and utility expenditures, as well as allow for a lot of cross-pollination between our academics. Experiential learning and supporting our core mission on campus are paramount. So any opportunities we have to work with our academic partners to share learnings, to share information and data are definitely key to our success. So here we have a little bit more details about our proposed King's College Circle Geo-Exchange. Ron, I believe this is one of the largest geo-exchange fields in Canada, if I understand correctly?
Correct. Yes.
So in this field, we're going to have, it's an interesting story how this came about, but we were doing the Landmark project, which involved redeveloping King College Circle. And Ron, do you want to explain just briefly how this opportunity came about and got initiated?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Mario. So this is exactly what you're saying. The Landmark project, part of me, offers a huge opportunity for us to access front campus. You can see our test drill rig there that we did several months back, and gives us an opportunity to underneath that project, put in this exciting geo-exchange system. But what I think is more remarkable than the system itself is that we're able to do this in the historic core of the campus. We're able to do this directly adjacent to some of the oldest buildings, not just at the university, but in the entire city. And it's a great demonstration project, I think, to the city and to our peers of how you can do sustainable type initiatives, not just in the new builds, but you can do this in the existing campus. And in fact, you can do it in the almost 200-year-old portion of our campus. So that to me is the most exciting part of it.
It was really great to see us seize that opportunity for that synergy between the Landmark project and saying this is the right time to make that investment in our green future and to drill those geothermal wells and create that first large-scale geo-exchange energy source. So as Ron was mentioning earlier, we are moving towards an internodal approach. And as you can see in this diagram in the bottom, this geo-exchange will sort of form the basis for that first large node as part of our carbon neutral master plan. And what we're expecting here is that this will be responsible for offsetting 15,000 tons of GHG emissions as part of our low carbon action plan from here to 2024. Again, now shifting over to the consumption side, that was the production side previously, but now on the consumption side, here's an example here at our new Spadina, Sussex residence. Following our new design standards and energy standards, this new residence will be built with a very, very low carbon intensity. In fact, I believe we're going to be at 6 or lower for equivalent kilograms of CO2 emissions per gross square meter. So this is one of the ways we're going to mitigate future emissions, is by looking at building better and building to a better standard. This chart is very interesting. It serves to show the emission intensity of our existing building stock on the St. George campus. So you can see right now that we're at an average of 69 kilograms of equivalent CO2 per square meter on an annual basis. And if we want to get to our goals, we need to bring that average down to 9 kilograms. So this is quite an ambitious target, but this is where the Spadina Sussex, following our new energy standards and building at 6 kilograms below that average of where we need to be, is going to help us moving forward. Everything we do to build under the equivalent 9 kilograms will help us meet our target moving forward. So that's for new construction. We'll talk a little bit more about the standard in a minute, but we also have a lot of existing buildings that we have to look at. And over 30 years, we have the opportunity now to touch these buildings in a meaningful way and to transform them. Transform the heating and cooling infrastructure, transform the envelope, and trying to do this in a tactful manner where we can actually reduce the consumption long term. What we hope to do is to leverage our deferred maintenance and asset renewal needs in these buildings to actually affect transformational change. And what we've done internally here is we've developed a team that we call the U of T USCO team, that are actually energy managers that are looking at developing feasibility studies for deep energy retrofits, where we can go in and redesign existing steam systems and start to convert them to low temperature, high delta T hot water systems, which will now be the gateway towards electrifying the heating on our campus. This will be a major step towards being able to shift towards a low carbon source of heating and have a massive impact long-term on our carbon emissions on campus. These projects will also pull from a couple different funding sources. Because they're deep energy retrofits, they're eligible for a lot of external incentive money, as well as leveraging our green revolving fund internally, and also leveraging the dollars that would have been spent anyway for asset renewal and deferred maintenance. So this really is a win-win-win for the university and for our carbon emissions. So this looks to account for roughly 6,600 metric tons of carbon reductions by intelligently transforming and renovating our campus. Here's an interesting project. So the St. George Heat Recovery Project, our IT center is going to be producing a ton of load. And Ron, I think this is probably one of my favorite terms that you've coined, and I won't steal your thunder, so I'll let you speak to this very, very quickly. But we're looking to recover a lot of the heat from this building and repurpose it to heat part of the campus, and also move us away from fossil fuels. Ron, what's the term you coined for this?
Yeah, so I like to call these things electronic boilers. So basically, the servers that we use for our email systems and this and that generate a lot of heat, just like a boiler does. Anything we can do to sort of take heat from those computational boilers and use it to heat our buildings is actually going to reduce the amount of fossil fuels that we need to burn accordingly.
Computational boilers, I love it. So that's great. We can take this low-grade heat using our internodal approach and use heat pumps to boost that low-grade heat, recover it, and use it to now offset fossil fuel heat in other buildings. So I think this is a fantastic initiative and a good example of how we're trying to transform how we look at heating our campus. Now, speaking a little bit more about the enhancing or the enhanced building standards that we're implementing, what we're really trying to do here is align ourselves with the Toronto Green Standard. The Toronto Green Standard, I think, is fantastic, and it sets up energy budgets and emissions budgets for all new construction or major renovation. What we've done here is we've adapted the Toronto Green Standard to better fit the archetypes of buildings that we have on our university campus. I think the Toronto Green Standard was very well built and designed for typical buildings that you'd see in the city. But being a university campus, we have some building types that are a little bit different than what the city would have. So we have laboratories and libraries and residences and food halls and those kinds of things. So what we've done is we've gone through and tried to carefully evaluate how we could adapt our building types to have their own sort of application under the Toronto Green Standard. And we've established energy budgets and carbon budgets for all new construction and major renovations on our campus that would meet or exceed Tier 1, Tier 2 requirements under the Toronto Green Standard. So this is a key piece of how we're going to mitigate future emissions from new construction and major renovations. And in our LCAP, this accounts for 8,300 tons of CO2 per year. This is a really key piece here, is fostering opportunities for partnership and engagement. And as I just mentioned, I think that the Toronto Green Standard and the Toronto's Green Will Initiative are key components to greening the entire city. Ron mentioned earlier on in the presentation that we are kind of a city within a city. And we have an opportunity here, as well as a responsibility, to do as much as we can to advance our carbon neutrality goals, but also support the City of Toronto's carbon neutrality goals and their initiatives. So we want to align ourselves with the best practices in the C40 and also the city's Better Buildings Partnership. So we're looking at these 6 key KPIs towards achieving net zero: benchmarking, audit, retrofitting buildings, strategic energy management and continuous improvement, as well as our deep carbon retrofits through our UESCO program, and trying to achieve zero net emissions over time. Anything you'd like to add to that, Ron?
No, I appreciate it. I think I've said it right at the onset that there is a series of really exciting projects, and we only had a couple of minutes to demonstrate some of them. Is by no means is an all-inclusive list. So there's more to come, and always love to chat about these things. We wanted to sort of shift the focus in the last 10 minutes here on what do we do from an engagement perspective, because achieving net zero campus isn't just about the boilers and the pipes and those things you don't see. A lot of it has to do with how we are trying to engage our broader community. And this is something I know Adriana focuses on quite a lot. So we'll turn it over to Adriana, and please, why don't you tell us a bit more about what the Sustainability Office is doing.
Thanks, Ron. If you could just pat me, thank you. So we're a nimble team. As you've probably heard, we focus on engaging with over 120,000 inhabitants and visitors on the campus under normal circumstances, who are studying, working, researching, and playing in the many types of buildings and spaces in our city within a city that is St. George campus. The SO is part of a diverse, multi-generational team of stewardship experts with deep institutional knowledge, provide city-scale services including utility and energy, waste management, property management, recreation, housing, food, and dining, and more. Sustainability goals beyond greenhouse gas reductions include moving to zero waste and, if possible, a net positive outcome. And we are working to promote and support our campus leaders by developing aligned frameworks, whether a sustainable development goal or carbon accounting frameworks, for operations staff to be better equipped to dialogue with and support climate action committees, sustainability commissions, faculties, colleges, researchers, student-led clubs, and individual initiatives who already catalyze action so as to collectively contribute to U of T's sustainability journey, objectives, and commitments in a culturally appropriate manner to the context of the particular space and culture. Next, please. So facilities and services are the staff that consider the well-being of the campus community and visitors on a daily but also a long-term basis. As part of this team, we make recommendations to clients who have ultimate decisions for their spaces, resources, goals, and budgets. We work to partner with them to consider how they can engage their own community members to set goals to prioritize sustainability and best practices, and in turn refine or tailor our programs and resources with those insights so as to make our efforts as relevant and meaningful as possible. Next. Part of facilities and services, as part of the facilities and services team, we offer services to departments, faculties, and clients as part of a meter square tenancy agreement. So we work to bridge campus community members' sustainability activities and U of T priorities and goals across this decentralized campus environment in a comprehensive and inclusive manner as much as possible to strengthen alliances, networks for collective action, and build community vitality and health in the process. Next. So little is known about some of our efforts beyond energy and carbon, but we are working to better communicate some of these activities in a comprehensive web page overhaul that will hopefully take place early next year. For example, we build to LEED Silver standards, but because we don't go to the process of certifying and buildings aren't labeled, our campus community members often don't realize we're aiming for high targets. And it may lead to potentially now having our own bespoke building performance. It may lead to some engagement projects with our campus experts and community members around bespoke labeling for buildings, perhaps, or at the very least, interpretive signage to help convey the benefits of the features we've invested in. Next. So we work with partners to a great extent in order to deliver and develop our services, our communication and material resources, the innovation and research activities, and the professional development and employment activities we undertake with a wide host of campus community members. They are intended to help integrate our efforts, align our common goals, and support our community members act on opportunities for individual and collective implementation of best practices and sustainable stewardship. We have been adapting to COVID, and we hope to grow our capacity, although we had to completely rework our engagement strategy to be made available online. And we will be growing our team in order to be able to scale some of the efforts and deploy some of the revamp programs we hope to relaunch in the beginning of next year. So what we have learned from the COVID experience is that collaboration with colleagues in other universities and our illustrious faculty experts has been really helpful in moving our programs and communications from raising awareness to creating frameworks and universal templates or checklists that will help us collect and aggregate data to better establish a repository of resources and case studies that we can share on best practices, and also to highlight champions and community participation and outcomes. COVID was a bit of a fire drill, so it helped us test out our resilience planning, identify gaps in processes and communications, and what we hope to do is capitalize on the cultural shift that took place to in much of our campus communities, members and activities moving, for instance, meetings and conferences online, and being able to mobilize large numbers of independent actors to establish platforms for sharing information and mobilizing collective action quickly. We also pivoted our research to learn and demonstrate the important role of sustainability in health and safety planning, whether for an extreme event or a pandemic. And through communication and program revamp, we hope to continue to explore how health, sustainability, and well-being are interconnected and interdependent. Next. So some of our communications and resources, as you know, the Low Carbon Action Plan was discussed earlier, and it was really the first front-facing report of its kind for U of T. It was published to signal our commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also that we were investing in and implementing infrastructure projects that would set the groundwork for the rest of the campus, making it possible for teams in concert with decision makers, stakeholders, and community partners to identify priorities and determine sustainability strategic plans for their particular context and culture. Next. So, sorry, I think we were on programs. Thank you. So these programs are designed for sustainable living, working, learning, research, building, purchasing, design, travel, growing, and dining. They often start with the development of a best practice guide, and then, as I mentioned, we are hoping to evolve these awareness-raising tools into instruments that can be implemented and used by campus community champions in their contexts to deploy best practices and prioritize sustainability in their areas of work, study, or play. We work with advisors in those contexts to help us refine the communications and program materials, making it ideally more relevant, but also to hopefully work with those advisors who will then champion and pilot those programs in their particular faculty, department, or program. Before COVID, I should just mention we have a Green Ambassadors program, which is a volunteer, currently staff and faculty program that we're hoping to expand to students as well. And we're hoping to develop bespoke sustainability training that might certify champions or ambassadors specifically designed for higher education sustainability professionals so that they can act with authority in implementing our programs through their particular area. I should mention that we have heard from a great deal of leaders and champions already working on, for instance, OISE and the Climate Action Committee or the Sustainability Commission at Victoria College, that they would be interested in perhaps adopting a faculty-wide certification. And we are hoping to determine with future faculty leaders who else might be interested to help us pilot a variety of programs faculty-wide in the year. Next. So we actually have a number of applied research innovation projects in the works that we look to develop very much with campus community members, but also with our work study students, intern colleagues, and through some projects that we do with faculty in courses and with independent research projects. Some of the projects Mark mentioned earlier for the Low Carbon Action Plan and the new Building Performance Standard will generate many more, hundreds of other projects for research and experiential learning. And where the Building Performance Standard started with energy efficiency and health and safety, we're looking to consider how the Building Performance Standard could be expanded to include well-being, procurement, and embodied carbon standards and principles as well. As well, we have, as Mark mentioned, the expansion of the GeoExchange system technology, and the largest urban field will be installed by 2022, I believe, in the Circle, making it possible for the Circle of older and heritage buildings connected through a hybrid model of centralized and decentralized nodes to also undertake deep retrofits. And this is an entirely replicable, scalable, an activity that will need a great deal of monitoring, evaluation, and a means to communicate with the campus community the benefits and the outputs and outcomes of this technology, but in a way that with our partners might be able to demonstrate what is possible across Canada with buildings and a district energy system that is of a similar size and age. Next. These are some of the projects that we're working on with our campus experts and colleagues regarding carbon capture and sequestration. Looking to, the team CERT is looking to essentially capture carbon emissions and turn them into valuable ethylene and ethanol feedstocks. Next. We have some research work underway with the Faculty of Architecture and Forestry, looking at the carbon sequestration potential of our trees, but we hope that this research will help inform a forest master plan, as well as help us to develop a natural capital study and potential plan for our properties. Next. As I mentioned, we work with faculty, both informal course scenarios, but also in independent research projects. Next. And we also employ work studies students and interns, as well as develop professional development training for not only the ambassadors, as I mentioned earlier, but we're also looking to develop energy management, modeling, and benchmarking training for campus community members to help us undertake some audits across the campus, as well as, trying to move sustainability from a compliance to a more strategic advantage, from a reactive to preventative situation where our outcomes are something we can better determine and plan for in advance. Next. These are some of the activities we undertook last year, Next. And these are some of the opportunities that we have ahead that we hope to enlist your interest and support in undertaking in the year ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adriana, Mark, and Ron for that overview. That concludes the presentations. Thank you to all panelists for sharing the work you are doing to advance U of T's commitment for action on climate change. We will now turn it over to the audience for a quick Q&A session. If you haven't already, please include your questions in the chat. Our first question is for Ron. Ron, you and Mark mentioned the importance of clean technologies such as GeoExchange Field, just recently drilled at Robert Street Field. One participant has asked in advance about the low carbon goals for the Huron-Sussex neighborhood and the U of T owned houses there. Would you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, pardon me. Thank you, Jennifer. I think it's important to acknowledge when we talk about a net zero campus, we are talking about all of our campus, including the residential assets from that perspective. It's funny, the Huron-Sussex neighborhood is probably the last neighborhood on campus that doesn't have our district energy system. And I put it that way purposely. I don't say it doesn't have, I say it's the last one to have, because it is on our plan to expand our district energy system, and to do that all the way up to Bloor and Spadina, and as such start to unlock opportunities that exist in areas like the Huron-Sussex neighborhood. Exactly what that looks like at this point, I don't know if we have specifics over that 30-year horizon. I can tell you step one for us is to get district energy there, to get more GeoExchange systems. You mentioned Robert Street Field. For people who may not know where that is, it's on the west side of Spadina, and we do have aspirations to bridge that across and link that into the main campus, and then maybe have an opportunity there to do energy sharing amongst those houses. So we do know that it's definitely something that's in our plan. Our residential buildings are something that we include as part of our plan. And then as time progresses, we're going to figure out how we get those homes, and some of them are century homes in that neighborhood, how we get those to also be aligned with a net zero strategy.
Thank you. Mark, the next question is for you. In your section, you touched on the St. George Bespoke UNESCO model. Would you please describe a bit more about an upcoming project and illustrate how the model works for our audience, please?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So the UNESCO model essentially what it does is it enables our internal team to go and perform audits and spot opportunities on campus and to develop these opportunities into a project, a deep energy retrofit project. So one of the projects that the team is working on currently is a deep energy retrofit of the Earth Sciences building. So they've gone through and they've performed an assessment of the potential to reduce energy, cost, and carbon emissions from the Earth Sciences building through a deep energy retrofit, which comprises of a package of energy conservation measures. After developing sort of a detailed feasibility study, we are now going to the market to have this project fully designed and implemented. And we hope that we can manage this in a sense that we can definitely guarantee and deliver on the anticipated results that we've developed in our feasibility study.
Okay, thank you. Another question for Ron, and this one is from our friend over at Rotman, Jan-Mart Smith, asked, if we are going to do offsets focusing on our own assets and not third parties for the last 20% of reduction towards neutrality in 2050, does that run the risk that we will need to own assets and operate them in areas where we do not have the real competitive advantage? So this is getting at, like, should we leave it to the experts? If you could comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. I think that's a great point. I think first and foremost, I don't necessarily automatically couple own with operate. And I think that I agree with you that we need to focus on our core business. You can tell I'm a Rotman alum, so I'm going to throw all the stuff you taught me back at you. But the important aspect here is exactly what you're mentioning. What is our core business? And it is not operating solar farms in this example. That doesn't mean that we can't partner with industry. I think that there are some great examples of industry partnerships on our campus already. So for example, Spadina Sussex residents, we know that we build, and quite often build really well, academic buildings. Things like the My Hall Center is a great example of some of the excellent work that our university planning, design, and construction teams do. But we also know we don't build too often residential buildings. And so in that case, we partnered with the market and with people who are experts in that field to co-develop a project. I would think something like this, where we talk about off-site renewables, is a great space where that type of model could be quite effective, where we get what's core to our business. And in this case, for us, it's access to virtual net metering, it's access to carbon credits that are resulting from it. Yet there's a realization that from our perspective, we're not solar panel operators by any means. So hence, maybe that's someplace where the market could help us fill that gap in a sort of a symbiotic relationship. That's our current leaning. I think fundamentally speaking, the biggest roadblock that we face right now on an off-site renewable solution is the regulatory environment, and that at present we don't allow. It's called virtual net metering, and we can talk for a while in and around what the technical aspects of that are. But until the regulation and until the province gets caught up to some of these concepts, we're going to have to develop it and probably hold until we can get the province aligned with what we're trying to do.
Okay, Jan-Mart Smith also shared a comment, computational boilers, eh? Any chance you can recover some heat from our amazing engineering and art?
We'll put that in the parking lot for something to examine.
All right, perfect. Ron, something that's come up a number of times now in the Q&A is many are concerned about the global pandemic's impact on maintaining momentum on meeting our climate action targets. What do you think will be the short and long-term impacts of COVID-19 in meeting our carbon reduction goals?
That's an interesting question and something that we've been talking about. I don't think it's going to impact us meeting our carbon goals in the long run. I think that those are goals that we are committed to as an institution. What I do think it's going to impact or has the opportunity to impact is what our campus looks like. And then as a result, how we structure the technical solutions to meet that. And what I mean, for example, is that the majority of people are staying home now, working remotely, studying remotely. So the impact that they have on our buildings in terms of lighting systems or things that they control is going to diminish over time. Conversely, though, we've implemented a lot of very important measures around safety, around ventilation specifically, that increase our ventilation rates and hence increase the impact that ventilation systems have on emissions. So that's sort of my long-winded way of saying, although I don't think it's going to impact us achieving the goals, it's likely going to impact the projects we assemble to achieve them. And as the buildings and the ventilations have a greater impact, we're going to have to focus on that more, at least for the foreseeable future, as we develop these strategies.
Perfect. Okay, Mark, the next question is from you. You recently joined U of T, and we have a number of staff in the audience. From a new staff member perspective, what excites you most about being part of these plans?
A good question. So I'm definitely a bit of a greenhorn here still, pun intended. I think what excites me most is that I've been working in the higher education sector for the last 5 years, working with a lot of our peer institutions. And I saw at U of T a tremendous opportunity to come and work with a team and an institution that has taken phenomenal steps in laying the groundwork and setting themselves up for success long term. Even our green standards, the fact that we have a very well-funded green revolving fund, that we have commitments and a strong vision for what our future looks like, from policy all the way through to funding execution, I think that this institution is really set up for success. I think that's something that most other institutions are struggling with, laying that groundwork and foundational work to pave the way towards carbon neutrality. And there's a lot of key elements that have to be in place to make this operational. And what I saw when I looked at the U of T was that all of the key elements were really in place, and that we were teed up here to really affect change in a transformational and meaningful way. So that was definitely for me a very exciting aspect, and was very attractive for me to move over to the U of T and join the team.
Okay, and I'm hearing that we have a question from Grant, the CCCS admin listed in the Q&A, but I can't see it. Ron, if you're just able to touch on that, because I've heard that it's been asked twice.
Oh, exciting. Well, I'm going to, the question that's listed here is a comment about if we can comment on biodigesters and sustainable lab projects. Are we planning on putting a biodigester on campus? And listed, I think, is from Grant Allen, but not so much where it's from. I think the idea of biodigesters is something that we've studied most recently. In fact, we've had several graduate level students look at, in particular in our case, a waste to fuel initiative focusing on organics, so waste food or food that's disposed from our kitchens, from our food halls, things of that nature. And is there an opportunity to take that and install a biodigester to do sustainable, create gas from that perspective? That is something that I think is very much interested, that I'm very much interested in. So it's something that we've studied at the graduate level, and hopefully in the coming years we'll be able to put in that biodigester, partnering with PIs, partnering with researchers to see how these things can be used, both at a local level, but also how they can be tied into a broader district energy system. So very much interested in that space.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for catching that one for me. We do have one final question here for Adriana. We are coming close to the 11 o'clock mark, so we have 1 or 2 minutes. Adriana, what do you see as the key future opportunities for involvement?
Thank you. Sorry. Please get involved. Get in touch with the Sustainability Office. Let us know of your initiatives. We're trying to desperately collect information on all the many initiatives and ideas and leaders across campus that are doing fantastic things, and we just can't keep up with. But we'd like to help promote those initiatives, facilitate collaboration, and put you in touch with our teams and certainly any of our plans that are working in the same vein and toward common goals. Thanks for asking.
Okay, unfortunately, we don't have time to answer all of the questions, but if you email sustainability@utoronto.ca, we'd be happy to follow up after the session. We are approaching the end of our session, so at this time we would like to thank everyone that registered and participated today, and our colleagues that supported this series behind the scenes, including Saima, Anushka, the superstar work study student, Ayako, and Dion. A special thank you to Wendy Adams for her generosity to make this series possible. Please note that the video recordings for this session will be made available on FeedLoop along with the presentations of the panelists. If any of you have questions that were not answered today, again, you can email them to sustainability@utoronto.ca and someone will get back to you. We encourage you to explore FeedLoop platform afterwards and ensure you register for the next session on post-COVID travel and the CECCS's air travel report scheduled for 10 a.m. next Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.